Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill Miles with the Hilton Head Island Bluffton Chamber of Commerce, and we're delighted to have you with us again this morning. I hope everyone had a nice 4th of July holiday weekend. It was certainly a busy weekend here in the Low Country. Cash registers were ringing, and our home and villa and hotels were certainly running high occupancy. So it's summer in the South, it's hot in the South, and all is good. But I wish we could leave it at that, but we can't. And there's no shortage of headlines and predictions on where our economy is headed, anywhere from talking about inflation to maybe a possible recession, real estate. They're all in the news. And to help us decipher those headlines this morning is our first speaker, and he is the chief economist for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Curtis Dubé heads up the Chamber's research and U.S. and global economies and provides analysis to policymakers in D.C. Curtis also leads the Chamber's Chief Economist Committee, made up of economic experts from a wide variety of U.S. industries. His insights have been noted in media and outlets such as the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. Also, I want to point out that Curtis is a fan of the Low Country, and here before too long, you just might see Curtis and his family walking on the beaches of Hilton Head Island. Curtis, we're glad that your Metro got you to work, and we're looking forward to hearing from you this morning.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, we'll be there on Saturday. I'm really excited to get out of DC. It's hot here, too. It's like 100% humidity, and I was stuck on the Metro, so I apologize for being a few minutes late. I gave a presentation yesterday, and I spoke for an hour on all this stuff, so there's a lot going on. But in the few minutes we had today, let's just focus on the key thing that everyone cares about, and that's inflation. Right now, and by the way, are you seeing? Yeah, you should be seeing the screen, right? Good. The inflation is what everyone cares about because it's the reason why we hear continued calls for a recession. So they picked up like a few weeks ago. People started saying, "Well, there's probably a recession coming. There could be a recession coming," and it's because of high inflation. We're now over 8.5%. What happened was that inflation started coming down a bit in April. It came down from a high in March, and everyone thought, "Oh, good, this is the peak. We'll probably pass the highest point of inflation. We'll start coming down at this point." And then it picked up again in May, and that's when you've seen the market disruptions. So the big drop in the market in the last couple of weeks, increased calls for recession, and then on top of that, we've had some weak consumer data. So there's two ways that inflation can cause a recession. The first is that consumers just can't keep up with the rate of inflation, so that spending falls below inflation-adjusted spending falls below, becomes negative, and that spending 70% of the economy. Excuse me. So that could lead to a recession, kind of mathematically. The thing was, consumers were holding up. We were spending at really high rates. We had a huge amount of savings built up through the pandemic. Wage and income growth was good, and people were starting to use credit cards a little bit more. And so spending was holding up above the rate of inflation all the way through April. Then we got May spending data, and it stopped. We saw retail sales was negative when adjusted for inflation, and so was all consumption. And that's really driven down the analysis and the thought that the economy could be in a recession now or going into one soon. I don't think we're quite there yet. We did have a negative quarter of growth in the first quarter. That was kind of a statistical issue with trade flows and inventories for businesses. Spending and business investment were pretty strong in the first quarter. But if you see growth being negative in the second quarter because of that weak spending data, we would technically be in a recession right now. So it is possible, although I don't think so quite yet. That said, if I did this presentation a week ago, I would have said the economy would likely grow at close to 3% in the second quarter. And now some people are predicting negative growth. The Atlanta Fed has a real-time economic forecast that's now significantly negative. And my own forecast is down below 1%. So we're teetering pretty darn close. The other thing that can cause inflation to lead to a recession is the Federal Reserve, the Fed's reaction to inflation. So the inflation came largely because of the pandemic, demand being very strong with all the fiscal support, supply chain issues driving up prices, workforce issues driving up wages, which were leading to higher prices. but also the Fed really increasing the money supply. I'm a firm believer in the old Milton Friedman nostrum that inflation is everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. That means that the Fed, through money, the creation of money, causes inflation and reduces inflation. And what they did was they pumped a tremendous amount of liquidity into the financial markets during the first stages of COVID. Totally the right thing to do. Had to prevent a financial crisis while we were dealing with a global pandemic. They did that. So they did a good thing. They did the right thing. They were hoping that the timing would work in their favor, that we'd get past the pandemic, the economy would recover, they could withdraw all that support in a timely way, and inflation wouldn't take off. It did, though. Inflation took off in a really big way in March of 2021. It happened to coincide with the passage of the American Rescue Plan, the $2 trillion spending plan that President Biden pushed when he came into office. And it's been taking off ever since. Thing was, though, if you think back, this is only a little over a year ago, vaccines were not fully available yet. They were fully widely distributed. We were still very much in the throes of the pandemic, which means that the economy was still beholden to swings in viral levels. And remember, Delta came shortly after that, and we had the Omicron wave. So it wasn't like we were fully past the pandemic. The Fed was really reluctant to pull fiscal support, or I'm sorry, monetary support. They didn't want to do that. So they said a lot of things like inflation is temporary, it's transitory, it's going to go away, hoping that they would buy them some time. It didn't work out that way. And they finally switched gears late last year, but really just like in the last few months. So they're behind the 8 ball on trying to get inflation under control. You can see in the chart the huge amount of liquidity they pushed into the market. And that's where that's helping, that's with all those other forces is really driving up prices. The way that they will now try to get inflation under control is through raising interest rates. So they've raised interest rates 3 times since March. The last time, the biggest increase in a really, really long time, 75 basis points. And they're going to continue to do that probably for the rest of the year. That will drive up interest rates for consumers and businesses. The easiest way to look at it, how it will impact consumers, is through the average rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage. Started the year at around 3%. It's now about 6%. So it doubled through the course of this year already, which is a really, really steep increase in a very short amount of time. This is going to put a damper on the really, really hot housing market. But we can apply this to anything that consumers use credit to spend on. So use their credit cards less because interest rates will go up. They are going to buy definitely fewer homes, fewer home repairs, fewer home remodeling, fewer cars, fewer car repairs, boats, RVs, appliances, electronics, things like that, furniture, home furnishings, things that we use credit to buy is going to be more expensive, and therefore there will be less purchasing of it. That will take demand down a bit. Businesses will face the same thing. Businesses will face higher borrowing costs. You can see that it's same story here. The 30-year, the average AAA bond started the year about 2.5%. AAA rated corporate bond, it's now 4.5% or about there. Really big increase. So that's increasing the cost of investment for businesses. As investment gets more costly, new projects become less profitable and fewer of them will be done, and businesses will invest less. That will bring demand down as well. It takes a while for these things to occur. It takes a couple of years for monetary policy to have an impact. There are lags. We're having inflation now for things they did in February of 2020. So it's going to take a while to get inflation down. A couple of years, 2024 probably, before we're back down. The Fed wants to get 2%. We're 8.6%. It's going to take a couple of years to get back down close to that target rate. So strap in. It's going to be a bumpy couple of years. There's no doubt about it. We're going to have swings with inflation. We're going to have swings on the market. So I'm pointing to CNBC over my shoulder. Market's going to have big swings day to day, week to week, month to month. The good news is we're in really good shape once we get past that. But it's going to take some doing. It's going to take some pain in the intervening years before inflation's tamed and we're on a more stable footing. The good news, while it can take a couple of years for inflation to be fully tamed, the good news is that we could get inflation coming down before the end of the year. The Fed predicts, so they use a different measure to measure inflation. Everyone mostly talks about the consumer price index, the broad measure of consumer prices. That's at 8.6%. The Fed uses a different one. It was in the chart, but it's a technical thing that we don't need to get into. They see that getting down to maybe 5% for the end of the year. It's at 6.5% right now. So that roughly means 7% for consumer prices before year end, right in that neighborhood. That would be good. And the reason why that could happen is that expectations play an enormous role when it comes to inflation. So when businesses and consumers expect inflation, they can cause inflation. When they expect prices to fall or inflation to come down, they can act in ways that will bring it down. So if you're expecting inflation, you buy now to get ahead of higher prices. That drives up prices in intervening time, leading to inflation and telling you that you were right to expect it. If you're expecting prices to come down, you delay purchases that can bring demand down. Inflation expectations have come down substantially in the last few weeks. They were really, really high in February, March, and April. They've come down since then, since the Fed started raising interest rates. This is really good news. This was not the case the last time we had a huge bout of inflation in the early 80s. Consumers, businesses, financial markets expected really high inflation, and it was really excruciatingly painful for the Fed to get inflation under control. Then Fed Chairman Paul Volcker raised interest rates to over 20%. The good news is it got inflation down. We had a 40-year period of low inflation, but we had a pretty significant severe recession, only 6 months. But the reason, and this is why I think we're in good shape afterwards, we had a period of robust growth, 5 consecutive quarters of over 7% growth after that. And then we had the rapid growth of the 80s until the S&L crisis. And so I think we could be in for a similar situation here if the Fed does cause a recession by causing demand to fall too much because of higher rates, but we'd be in really good position afterward. I've taken up too much time already. I'm going to stop there and take any questions. And I will send Bill and the team at the Hilton Head Chamber the slide deck here, and you are free to have that and use that as you wish. Each of these slides is annotated, so it has my analysis of each of the data points for you to use as you wish.
Curtis, thank you. I wish we had the full hour that we could have heard your presentation yesterday. We do have some questions, and thank you for taking those. Our first question is coming from Rodney, and Rodney is asking if there's talk about having a recession, if it may be shallow and brief, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, good question. So if we do have a recession, so let me take you through the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is 2 recessions. So we could be in a recession right now because of those issues with consumer spending. That would be probably brief. We'd probably already be through it at this point and then return to low levels of growth. I think that is possible. Probably 50-50 chance of that. But that wouldn't be so painful. It would be the next one in 2023 or 2024 that would come from the higher interest rates. And I do think it would be brief. I think it would be 6 months. Usually you have to have, it's not necessarily true, but usually you have to have 6 months of negative growth for it to be a technical recession. I do think it could be pretty steep, but we'd bounce back really quickly, and beyond that, we'd be in really pretty good shape. I would think that would be later next year into 2024, roughly. And again, the chances of that are 50-50. So if you have a 50-50 chance now, and then a 50-50 chance a year or 2 from now, so a 25% chance of 2 recessions, but a 50% chance of at least 1. And just one thing to keep in mind for context, the chances of the U.S. economy being in a recession 1 year, at any point in time, 1 year in the future, is 20%. So a thing like a pandemic or a global financial crisis or a dot-com bubble bursting or an S&L crisis or oil shock, to name 5 of the last 6 recessions, other than the Fed-induced one in the early 80s, there's always a 20% chance something like that can happen. So 50% is certainly elevated, and it's risky, but keep that in mind that there's always a 1 in 5 chance that we could be in a recession a year from now.
All right, thank you. Our next question is coming from Kay, and Kay is asking, how much does the Ukraine impact our overall U.S. economy?
Yeah, another really good question, and something I would certainly get into more in a longer period. So in a couple of ways. One, gas prices are going to remain high because there's a lot of reasons why gas prices remain high, but part of it is the supply disruptions because of Russia, oil and gas, and issues in Ukraine. that's important, but and just geopolitical instability is a problem. But then issues with commodities, a lot of basic elements and things that we need just for industrial purposes. Russia's a supplier, Ukraine's a supplier. Ukraine's a big supplier of food. There's going to be some major issues with food prices and food shortages. And that's going to, and then fertilizer issues as well. It's going to lead to other more issues with food shortages and higher prices. So it's going to be destabilizing for the summer and for the foreseeable future. It is a problem. It is a major problem that we should not be overlooking.
All right, the next question is coming from Helen, and Helen is asking, what keeps you up at night?
Well, I think for economists, the things that keep us up at night are that, well, a couple of things. One, we're always wrong. No one's ever right. The only people who are ever right are the people who predict 15 of the last one recessions. They're always saying the sky is falling. They only right that one time. But that it's and that comes from the unknown unknowns. So I didn't necessarily think, for instance, that inflation was going to be transitory last year. I didn't think it was going to be this bad. And then even a few weeks ago, I didn't think inflation would cause consumer spending to fall as much as it has, and then it did. So it's those things that we just don't foresee that keep us up at night, and that's probably for every economist, but kind of more. I'm more optimistic than most. Like I said, I think we're in pretty good shape for the next, say, after 2024. But the more like specific thing right now is a very even rockier couple of years than I'm predicting. Like I said, it's going to be bumpy. I'll just use the stock market as a gauge. We'll get back to that high, whatever it was, 36, whatever on the Dow, sometime in 24 or 2025. But we could go to some pretty low lows between then and now because of the volatility. And then again, back to the unknown unknowns. We've got a lot. It's just something strange about periods like this where, it's not strange. It's when you have a weakness like inflation, that's really, inflation causes a huge amount of uncertainty. It makes it really hard for businesses to plan. So you end up with shortages because businesses don't want to sell for a certain price because the price could be going up, especially for their inputs, and they could end up in a loss position. Workers don't want to work for a certain wage. All these issues compound on each other. When you're in an environment like this, every other issue becomes that much more damaging. So Russian invasion of Ukraine, another health issue, whatever it is, again, the unknown on top of a very volatile situation right now could be really bad. It's just, that again, we just don't know what that would be, but those things are always lingering out there, those black swan events.
All right, Curtis, one more question for you, and that is, what would you anticipate the impact of the current economy on the domestic, and the domestic being specifically drivable tourism, through the balance of the year?
Well, as having had to try to book a place in Hilton Head this summer, I don't think it's going to be an issue for right now. And we're doing a week in Hilton Head. The place that we normally rent in Sea Pines was 3 times what it normally is. We didn't do that one. We found another spot in Sea Pines though. But so the domestic, there's a huge amount of demand for domestic travel, and the demand is outstripping the supply, especially when you throw in the issues with temporary workers. So all these tourism areas are having a hard time filling all their open positions. And then we're going to Michigan later in the summer, where my wife is from, and same issue there. Could not find a place to stay for a reasonable amount. So just anecdotally, I think the domestic tourism industry is okay. But then going forward, I think it's going to be a little different next summer, because I do think the economy is going to be weaker. All those savings that we, as an economy, have built up will be spent down because of higher prices over the next few months. And so there's going to be a different environment. It'll be a lot weaker than it is right now, but we're at historic strength when it comes at least to prices. And that will probably reverse itself. But we do have, again, a tremendous amount of built up demand for people wanting to travel and get out of the house and do things they haven't for the last couple of years that might temper that a little bit.
All right, Curtis, thank you for being with us today. And I also want to say thank you for choosing Hilton Head Island as your vacation destination. And we look forward to seeing you next week when you're on the island.
Yeah, I'll stop by. Looking forward to it.
Please do. Great. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to drill things down a little closer to home now and looking at Beaufort County, specifically that of our school district. And we've seen recently that teachers in Beaufort County will see bigger paychecks this year, thanks to efforts at the state as well as local levels. And starting salaries for first-year teachers are now at $50,000 when you include the cost and living stipends as well as other add-ons to teacher pay. And here to explain it all is the superintendent of Beaufort County Schools, Dr. Rodriguez. Dr. Rodriguez, I think you're into your third year now, aren't you?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, it's been an interesting 3 years, and thanks for being with us this morning. We look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you very much for having me. And today I'm enjoy the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about briefly talk a little bit about some of our summer programming, mention some of our new principals in the Bluffton Hilton Head area, and then get into the compensation piece, if that's okay. The summer programming we have this year, we're running elementary extended summer intervention literacy programs with about 1,200 third graders in order to improve their reading and writing skills. And we're utilizing some really fun and interactive ways to get them to do that. But we know that the impact of the pandemic, has been significant on students, and this is one way that we can try to attack some of that learning loss with students that need it. And we're have programs in place to support some of that. Middle schools and high schools, we've got programs for 950 students in the middle schools, and we've got language maintenance programs for about 120 of our newcomer students that are trying to acquire the language in order to be successful in the classroom. Some of our new principals I'm excited to mention to you and introduce you to is Michelle Brockway. She was the assistant principal at Hilton Head Island Elementary School since 2014. She's going to be taking the helm there at Hilton Head Island Elementary School. For Sarah Owen, who has opted to go back into the classroom, is one of the things that she wanted to do. And so we're excited to keep Sarah in our schools in Hilton Head, and at the same time welcome Michelle Brockway, who has significant years of experience and right there in Hilton Head. And then we have Tracy Lynese, an assistant principal at Okatee Elementary, who is going to be replacing Jamie Pinkney in Okatee. And Tracy has been with our school district for 23 years as an elementary teacher, an interventionist, an assistant principal, and now moving up into the principal ranks. And so we're excited what she brings to the table. And then Clinton Austin, who's been an assistant principal at May River High School since 2017, he'll be taking the helm at Hilton Head Island Middle School for the upcoming school year. And so one of the important things I wanted to talk with you about today is about the budget that just passed and the increased compensation for educators. As you know, we're dealing with national teacher shortage. This is an issue across the country, and attracting high quality educators is something that is significantly important in order to help improve outcomes for students. And so in order to tackle that aspect of it, we know that we needed to do something about the compensation package. Here in Beaufort County ranked 53rd out of over 70 school districts in the state of South Carolina in compensation, particularly when dealing with our first year teachers. And so what this budget does, 100% of the 4 mills that we asked for will go to teacher and employee compensation. And so it should move us from 53rd to number 1, if not in the top 2 or 3. And that is a significant piece in attracting and retaining quality educators. We have a locality supplement that we provide, and then we have a $2,000 recruitment and retention bonus that we will be providing this year. And so when you add all that up, it will move the salary from 37,000 to 50,000 as a beginning teacher here in Beaufort County. And so we're excited about that. We're excited about the impact that we believe that can have on recruiting and retaining educators. And the increases move throughout the scale of the system. So if you're a veteran educator, you're benefiting from the increase as well. And one last piece, when I first arrived here, the salary steps ended at 23 years of service. So somebody 24, 25, 26 years of service, their salary didn't increase from year to year. That was the top end. One of the things I've done since I've been here was added a year to the end of that every year. So we're now recognizing through year 26. And by doing that each year, those more veteran educators also continue to get that step increase each year as well. So that's essentially what our budget was focused on and prioritizing this year, because we know that when we put high quality educators in front of students, that ultimately our students win. So brightest teachers in the state, we want to attract them and we want to keep them here. And by focusing on compensating our staff, we're really focusing on students directly benefiting their future in our region.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. And teacher compensation has been something that's been talked about for a long time, and you certainly come in and made a difference in that. And it's going to be a tremendous help in recruiting talented teachers and keeping them in the classroom. Our first question's coming from Rodney, and Rodney is asking about those pay rates and how they compare to similar school districts in neighboring counties or states.
Yeah, it would be interesting to note that as we were looking at making this impact on our budget, Jasper County and Allendale, for example, had higher salaries than we did here in Beaufort County. And so other school districts are going to be moving up their salaries because that's part of the governor's initiative and the general counsel's initiative as well. However, we're doing more than that initiative in order to move ourselves up in the overall pay ranking in the state. So as it stands, we should be number one. If not, I believe we'll end in the top 3 if we're not number 1. And I have to tell you, our school board was very supportive. This was a priority for them as well. And I'm thankful to our county council who unanimously approved it.
All right, thank you for that. And one last question. I see that you're in your mobile office and you're man on the move today. We really appreciate you taking time for us. But the last question is coming from Brent, and Brent is asking how the Beaufort County graduation rates are doing.
So last year we ended with the highest graduation rates, I believe, that the county had. We don't have the final numbers yet because those numbers don't get tabulated till August, because there are still students that are graduating in the summer as they complete some credit recovery programs. So I don't have a number for you, but we're anticipating to stay along the same lines and the same trend that we have, and it's been improving, and I believe we'll be on par for that. So.
All right, Dr. Rodriguez, thank you for making time for us today, and thank you for the great job, your leadership, and what you're doing for the Beaufort County School District.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Bill. Always enjoy it.
All right, we're going to move ahead now and talk a little bit about what's happening in Bluffton. And as we know, that Bluffton is currently the fastest growing area in the state of South Carolina, according to the census data. We also know that dirt is moving in the Washington Square development, which is in Bluffton. And it'll be a multi-use project that will encompass green space, retail, residential offerings on the Buckwalter Parkway. And to talk about that today, we have David Johnson, who's the partner with the development company Speyside Partners. He's been an investor and an entrepreneur with over 40 years of experience in asset management. David, welcome, and tell us what's going on at Washington Square.
Well, thank you, Bill. And before I get started, I wanted just to acknowledge Dr. Rodriguez. I mean, for all of us that are involved with any economic development here in Beaufort County, I mean, we're very fortunate to have him, lead the education process, which is so key. Thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen, tell you a little bit about what's going on. I'm going to try to do that. Let's see. Yeah, can everyone see that? I hope. So we started, Washington Square was started with the intent of creating a walkable village with a vibrant shopping, dining, and living experience within the fast-growing area of Buckwalter. This is many of you may know where it is. I'll just point out it's to the right here is the movie theater area, and to the left over here is the Kroger Center, the Buckwalter Place. There will be eventually a light here between the movie theater complex and us. And there is a road that will be connecting Washington Square with Buckwalter Place, where the Kroger is. And this they've already started. I'm just showing you the photo of the wetlands have been filled in, and the stormwater drainage has been done in that. Our intent, as I said, was to create a walkable village centered around two things, centered around a well-landscaped square where we could have music and food trucks and just relaxation. I'll show you a photo of what that looks like at this point. As you can see, these bollards here can come down and we can put food trucks and music in the square. Where we are currently is, many of you may have seen the first building that's gone up is Low Country Fresh Market and Cafe, which is has gotten a lot of accolades for its connection to the St. Helena farms, local farms, and it has really become quite a community gathering space. Second thing that's going on right now is there is Logan Homes is building a 58 townhome community across from Low Country Fresh. These are some early renderings. They'll all front on the they'll be fronting on Bleecker Street with driveways behind. It should create quite an interesting living experience, and they have gone. They plan to go vertical and by the fall, and you'll start seeing some townhomes going up. The horizontal is being done at the streets and the sewer and the lights and all that are being done at this point. The next phase for us will be we're clearing and doing all the site work for what we call Washington Square East, which is everything east of the square between Buckwalter and the square. Our first building that will be built and should be started in this summer will be this building, on the square, this L-shaped building on the square, which will include, this is what it looks like, but these are renderings this is from the square, and this is down Bleecker Street with retail below on the first floor and apartments above on the second and third floors. That will be the first phase that we will build on the square, and once that is started and well underway, we'll do the same thing, build a similar building on the other side of the square, again with retail retail below and residential above. And that will be the first phase, and the rest of it will be mixed use office / retail and apartments throughout the rest of the surrounding the square. We're pretty excited about what's happening. Finally, we've got a fair amount of activity on that's going on, and some more announcements probably by the end of this month about some retailers that will also be here, both local and some national retailers. So with that, I'll stop and ask for questions.
All right, David, thank you. And our first question is coming to us from James, and James is asking what the price range will be for the apartments, and if you've determined that yet.
The apartments will be, the apartments above the retail, which we're doing, not the Logan Homes townhomes, will be in the range of 2 bedrooms will be around $2,400 and a month, and 1 bedroom's around $1,800 a month. There'll be 20 apartments on the first phase above the retail.
Next question is coming from Brittany, and Brittany is asking, what is the large building on Minetta Lane in your rendering?
So that, I'll go back to that. I think I can share now, maybe not. So Brittany must be talking about this building. This is right now is planned for a boutique hotel, an 80-room boutique hotel. That will not be started right away, but that's the ultimate plan, is to have a hotel on the site, a boutique hotel.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then the next question is about mitigating the traffic and infrastructure issues, is coming from Rodney.
Great question, and that's one of the reasons that the county and the town really would like these interior roads built. Like I said, I showed you the one between our development and Buckwalter Place, which should be in place over the next 6 to 8 months. That'll take a lot of pressure off Buckwalter, and then the light that I mentioned that the county has determined should be right on Mott Street or across from Woodbridge is where it's is the plan at this point.
All right, thank you. The next question is coming from Maria, and Maria is asking, will there be parking separate for residents and those that travel to the development for walking around?
There will be. There'll be some mixed parking, but there will be parking for residents as well.
All right, David, thank you for being with us today. Thanks for taking the questions, and we're looking forward to continuing to watch the progress there that you and Washington Square are making.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Nice to see you. Have a good summer.
Thank you. Thank you. Bring things into Hilton Head Island now. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We all have passed by it on William Hilton Parkway, and on the north end of the island, commonly referred to as the Mid-Island Track. And here to talk about the ambitious plans the town has for this area is Jennifer Ray. And Jennifer, I think, has just celebrated her 10th anniversary with the town of Hilton Head Island, and she is the Capital Program Manager. Jennifer, if you haven't had the opportunity to work with her, I can tell you does a super job. And Jennifer, we're delighted to have you with us today and hearing about the plans.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me. We do have some very ambitious plans, and I am excited to share this with you today. Get it here to where you can see my screen. As the project manager, can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, because I just got a message that Zoom quit unexpectedly. So
we do. Jennifer, I think you might be frozen. We see you, but we don't hear you.
This is Jennifer. You can't hear me?
We do you now. Yes, good to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have a world-class team. I need to breeze through this. The Mid-Island Initiative area is a mix of old and new commercial development, industrial uses, some residential, and the airport, as well as some significant cultural resources and town-owned property. I guess you're not seeing my screen anymore. So Kelly, if you have the control, if you'll move on a couple slides. So there you can see what we initially started with, and then the district as outlined with working with our consultant team, and even further refinement through our workshop with town council, the Bagel area to the north, plan north on this image will be included in this district. And next slide. We had significant stakeholder engagement that led to some initial recommendations for the district. Next slide. And these are going to go real quick. Some character emerged based on our community preference for green, not gray. Next is close and cozy versus spread out. Next is complete and varied and not single use. Next is connected versus isolated. Next is walkable, not auto-focused. And next is artful and memorable, not generic. And there's some good examples of this character already on our island, including Shelter Cove Town Center, Harbor Town, and in Bluffton with Old Town Bluffton, and even Palmetto Bluff. But this just kind of gives you the character feeling that our consultants were looking for. And if you'll go the next, click through to the next one, these are the key themes. So if you followed along with the art plan process, with our strategic plan, any of the things that the town has been working on, you know, these core values keep coming up over and over again to protect and enhance both our people in our neighborhoods as well as our natural environment, to connect our people in our open spaces and neighborhoods. We even had a connection was one of the work groups. And then to evolve. We can't stay just like we are all the time, just like we heard earlier about what's happening in Bluffton and what's happening with the economy and the schools. We have to evolve also. So we want to look at our future land use plan and potentially some new redevelopment standards for this area. So next slide, all of that, key themes and the community input, plus some analysis of the existing land use, zoning, the airport overlay, and our whole historic and cultural resources have led the team to this initial strategy. So here you can see they start with identification of some hubs with a large district hub right in the middle. And then an additional hub, not identified here, but as we've worked through this project, an additional community hub up in the Mitchellville area. Next slide shows the importance of protecting the green network. You know, our core value and our future identified reinventing sustainability and protection of the environment. And so you can see how that's taken into account within this district, and the significant amount of open space highlighted here in green throughout the district. Next slide shows the opportunity to connect. There are a lot of ways to connect through some improved intersections, through various types of roadways, as well as significant pathways. You know, we already have a gold-friendly bike and pedestrian path system here on our island, and this plan seeks to improve that even further and maybe find some missing connections to add to. And then the next slide is the initial thoughts on what that future land use might include. So instead of being single focused, like I showed in those images, maybe it's mixed use, and that would be the purple color. Also looking at ways to support the area around the airport and some additional commercial support there. Opportunities for additional residential, including in the historic neighborhoods. You know how much we've talked about affordable housing, workforce housing, just housing for business leaders. It's a huge issue on the island, but making sure that we're addressing that within this district. So this is the future thoughts for what that redevelopment strategy might look like. Next slide will transition from the district into the town-owned Mid-Island tract that you mentioned, Bill. Next slide. It's 103 acres that is right in the kind of the middle of the island. It's a portion of the former Planters Row golf course. You can see it here on the slide. Currently being used for walking, biking, bird watching, photography. And the good news is all of those uses will continue to be available as we redevelop this site. The next slide shows you the concept plan. The goal when we set out, what we told this world-class team was to develop plans for a best-in-class park. They looked at leading design principles, emerging trends, analysis of the site, and also significant stakeholder engagement. We met with over 100 different stakeholder groups. We had thousands of people respond to a survey. They developed a program that looks at civic and cultural features, natural features, and recreation. The next slide shows one of the amazing images that really helps you see this park in a little bit more of a three-dimension. This is a bird's eye perspective that shows the 5 key areas: the heart of the tract, cultivated landscapes, island heritage, an eco park, and active play. So we're going to quickly go through each of those sections. Next slide shows the heart of the tract, includes components such as a fountain, a great lawn, community facility, could be a tower, and maybe even an event grove. Next slide just shows you some of the images. None of these are saying that this particular fountain will be there. It's just trying to show you some of the character. Expect this park to be built with the same level of attention to detail and high quality as other town parks, such as Low Country Celebration Park and Shelter Cove Community Park. So expect nothing less here. And in fact, even more, as you can see from these images that give you a flavor of what could happen in the heart of the park. Next slide shows another one of that event grove. Imagine weddings and storytelling and Shakespeare in the park and just an intimate, real intimate space in the middle of 100 acres right in the middle of the island. Next slide shows you the island heritage. I know probably a lot of the listeners know how many historical and cultural resources are on the island, but we're blessed in this area to be adjacent to the historic Union Cemetery in the bottom right corner of this slide and have the opportunity to relocate St. James Baptist Church to this particular site as they move away from the airport. So the consultants looked at also honoring other island heritage besides just the Gullah heritage and creating this area with cultural gardens and an open air market and an island gathering space. The next slide shows you some of those case study images that show the different components that could happen within this part of the site. And then the next slide shows you another one of those bird's eye perspectives. So this would be if you had entered off of Union Cemetery Road, the church and the Union Cemetery would be down off to your right, just off the screen. And this shows you where that community building, open air market area, and then the gardens back beyond, what kind of community space this could be to further promote and honor our island's cultural and heritage. The next slide gets into the cultivated landscapes. So think of areas to learn about different plant material, to relax and enjoy, to stroll, to sit. Next slide shows you some of those. It includes both cultivated gardens, a Monet garden, natural plant materials of the low country, and also accommodating the staging that currently happens with Concours d'Elegance. We know what an important activity event that is for our island, so making sure that we continue to be good stewards and accommodate that within this area of the park. Next slide is the active play, and I mentioned recreation, and a lot of people were hoping that there wouldn't be recreation on this site, and I can share that the planned recreation is not what you would think of as active, not balls and bats and lights, but more of community activities that you and your family, your kids, your grandkids can enjoy. So next slide, think of things like interactive water features, adventure playgrounds and natural play. And the most active part might be what they're calling the yard, kids running and laughing and having fun, but it's not organized park sporting events, if you will. Also opportunities for playing chess in the park. That's something that's come up lately. We added that at Shelter Cove, and we're looking at making some of those kind of board games that could be outdoor games part of this active play area. The next slide shows the eco park component, which is around 50 acres, so about half of the park. It could include an eco center, some observation decks, boardwalks, canopy areas. If you haven't had a chance to be on the site, the Audubon Society is out there a lot. I've had the opportunity to be out with them and see some of the amazing birds out there, people photographing them. And if you go to the next slide, you can see some images of the wildlife that's out there, as well as some opportunities for how we can preserve and protect, but also witness and be able to have these blinds and places that you can learn more about the ecology of our island. Next slide. This again is just the overall, now that you've heard just a snapshot of the different parts. I want to just be clear that this is really just a snapshot. The consultant team was here May 24th with a workshop with town council, and they did almost a 2-hour workshop. So their complete presentation is on our website, as well as a recording of that presentation, so you can go and hear it from those experts. I'm just giving you kind of the real high level. Next slide shows how we're also incorporating the Ashmore Tract. If you're not familiar with that, it's directly across William Hilton Parkway, backs up to PSD, and there's an opportunity for an 18-hole championship style disc golf, as well as a pavilion and more interpretive trails. Next slide shows you how that disc golf might be routed through this significant natural resource. And if you'll go to the next slide, I'm wrapping it up. Want to let you know what the next steps are. I mentioned we had a workshop with town council in late May. For the Mid-Island Initiative area, we're going to have our consultants do some additional market research and stakeholder engagement. They will be preparing that final redevelopment strategy and come to town council for consideration of approval of this district plan. Following that, we'll work on maps such as a future land use map. We'll revise our zoning map and our development standards specific to this district of the island. Then even farther from that, next steps, we will take this concept and move around our island and look at other districts that need to be studied in this way, such as the Palmetto Bay Road Corridor. That might be another district plan that comes after this Mid-Island Initiative area. For the tract itself, and stay tuned, hopefully the next time we start talking about this, we'll actually have a name for the tract instead of Mid-Island Tract. But they're working on an estimate of probable costs for this 100-acre park. Council will consider approval of this master plan later this late summer, early fall. They will develop phase 1 development, and then we'll move into the detailed design and get ready for construction, hopefully in 2023 is what we look to go there. So as I mentioned, that's the end of my presentation, but I really do want to direct you to our website. because there is a ton more information on there. If you go to the major initiatives, you will see 2 buttons that you can toggle between for both the initiative area and the park. And every presentation that this team has done is loaded on there, and you can get loads and loads more information. But Bill, at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you or your listeners have.
All right, Jennifer, thank you. That very, very impressive presentation. Thanks for sharing your slides as well as your images. And we do have a few questions. The first one's coming from Scott. And Scott is one saying this is very exciting. And then what is the overall timeline and funding source or funding sources?
That's a really good question. The timeline is to come back to council, like I said, in later this summer, early fall, so maybe the September timeframe, with a final master plan for their approval, as well as a cost estimate. The consultant threw out in their workshop that parks of this size and this level of detail, fit and finish, typically run anywhere around $100 or $1 million an acre. So if you do that quick math, that's around $100 million. We don't anticipate it to be that large, but when you get to a significant project like this, expect it to take multiple phases and multiple funding sources. At this time, council hasn't discussed the particular funding source because they don't know how much it's going to cost yet. So that'll come out later this summer, early fall, when we'll be able to say how much, how many phases, what the first phase is, and then we can estimate a multi-year schedule for having it done. I know that the goal would be to not have constant construction, but not to drag it out too far either, and always have a part of the park that is open to the community. Because once we made the decision to open what was the golf course, and let people start using it, they've really latched on, and it's become a routine to be out there daily, walking dogs, riding bikes. So we want to make sure there's always part of the park that is available and something under construction as well. So I hope that's as much detail as I can give at this point for that question.
All right, thank you. The next question is coming from Donna. And Donna is asking, will there be any type of amphitheater in the park?
That's a great question, Donna. And yes, in the heart of the park, that event grove, if you will, would be an amphitheater, more of an intimate amphitheater, where there were some images of trees growing up through so that you get that shade. But that's the area of the park that would contain that component.
All right, Ruth is asking if the Northridge Plaza, if that's part of the redevelopment plan.
Yes, sir. That is part of the redevelopment district. It includes Northridge Plaza, goes over to Port Royal Plaza across the street, includes Sea Turtle Marketplace. You know, kind of think of that part of the island is what's part of that larger district.
All right, Jennifer, thank you. We've had several other comments just about how exciting this project is, and thank you for sharing it with us today, and we appreciate your leadership on this project.
Thank you. It's a great project to be a part of, and it's always a pleasure sharing it with your group. So thanks for having me.
All right, that was Jennifer Ray with the Town of Hilton Head Island. That's going to conclude our Power Hour for today. Thank you for joining us. We hope you have a great summer, and we look forward to seeing and talking to you next time. Thanks for being with us.